I think Sowerby Bridge, it's a sort of rugged, down-to-earth town where quite a lot of people are poor, some people are quite arty, and it's a good place to be. It's a little secret waiting to be discovered, I think.
Well, I often think of Sowerby Bridge as being Hebden Bridge's evil twin. It's got some interesting qualities.
Sowerby Bridge is a beautiful place. The people are wonderful. I mean, I moved up from London a year ago, and I absolutely love it here. The people are wonderful. You know, it's just a wonderful place to live.
The main thing that's kept me in Sowerby Bridge is the people, I'd say. You know, there's a real sense of community and people willing to just get things done in Sowerby Bridge. If you want to do something in Sowerby Bridge, you just do it and get on with it.
You know, it's my hometown. That's where I lived, spent my childhood. I've travelled since, but I've come back to where I used to live. It's home. It's my hometown. The thing about this place is that there's history, the roots. You know, it's all there, you can see it.
Sowerby Bridge has still got dirt under its fingernails. It's not as twee as some places, like the one up the valley there that everyone goes to.
Sowerby Bridge was one of the early industry towns. Of course, because of the water, it had the mills, and because of the mills, you got the textiles. And when you get the textiles, a lot of the other industries come into it, and as within a lot of pioneering industries, you get not very clean industries. So Sowerby Bridge was known perhaps as a dirty town by people who didn't live in Sowerby Bridge. If you lived in Halifax, you live in Sowerby Bridge, oh, fitter, that sort of reaction you get, yeah.
So the street I was born into was quite well known, shall we say. You'd call it a slum area now. I mean, it was very poor housing. We lived in number 1, which was next to the Middin, which was outdoor toilets, 3 houses to a toilet, and then dustbins round the back. You might sometimes be sat at the toilet and there's a little rat looking at you. It's amazing, really. And I do remember getting off the street once. I was 4, and I found my way onto this road here, where we are now, further down there, where the library is, and I staggered in, and I'm sure I would have had a snotty nose and grubby and what have you. And the chief librarian, I could see her face even after all these years, came in and asked me what I was doing. I said, I don't know, what is this place? She said, it's a library. I said, oh, I don't know what that means. She said, oh, we have books here. And of course I thought lit up. And she said, and when you're able to read properly, you'll be able to come in here and borrow books. Oh, I can read. And she looked at me a bit dubious, of course, so chose a book, sat me down, and I just went off reading. I'd had pneumonia a couple of times when I was very young, and I was at home rather than hospital. And my dad used to just read to me, you know, and I used to fall asleep. And I just learnt a very natural way, really. So that was certainly one part of this Hollins Mill Lane here.
You know, the centre of the town now, it just seems to be just barber shops and restaurants. You know, it used to be a much more varied shopping centre than it used to be. And of course there used to be 2 cinemas. There was the Soldo, which is near the market, and of course there was the Roxy, which I used to patronise them when I was a boy.
Oh, it was a lovely building. The building itself was a long, oblong shape, but 3/4 of the building was taken up by a ballroom, and that was a beautiful ballroom. And at one end of the building it was a full floor-to-ceiling mirror, and at the other end it was a stage on it. It was a lovely room, My mum started out at the Isolde Cinema as a usherette, and then after another few more years, she became manageress. They needed another girl to take over from her as usherette. I believe they called her Norma. And one of my times when I came down to my break, Norma had been collecting the tickets off everybody. And she said, come over here, John, have a look at this. And she held one string up, and there were about that many tickets on it of people going into Picture House. And then she held the other one up, she said, look at these, and there were that many, and they were all complimentary. Because my mum was so generous and kind. Her saying was, oh, they haven't got much, and she used to let them in for free. So, yeah, so you wonder why the picture's shut, but yeah.
I'm guessing my first memories of Sowerby Bridge was when I was quite young, actually. I used to live in Halifax on quite a high hill, and quite often at the weekends, my dad would call us all to the attic, me and my sisters, to look out the window and to watch the mills burning in Sowerby Bridge. So that's how I first remember Sowerby Bridge, just this time of burning mills, which I'm sure there weren't that many, but at the time it seemed like a very common occurrence, and that's what we used to do on our weekends.
Actually, there have been several fires, of course, but there was the fire in the flour mill, and the Sowerby Bridge Urban District Council were in session in the council chambers on Hollins Mill Lane, and they saw the flames through the windows of the council chamber, and they adjourned the meeting to go outside into the car park by the fire station to watch the fire. And the wall of the flour mill facing the river collapsed into the river and produced a tidal wave which drenched the council. So everybody sort of enjoyed that one.
The first of the sort of Sowerby Bridge things that I used was the old swimming pool when the kids started swimming, and it's sort of really tall and narrow compared to a modern building, and if you're a parent you had to go on this balcony and watch, and the balcony is basically only wide enough for people to sit down on, so every time anyone wanted to move everybody had to stand up, and then people had to sort of shuffle past them, so it was quite funny.
When it was my break at 8 o'clock-ish, round about that time, I used to go to swimming baths and meet up with my mates. And I remember one particular time I was there, and I was back a bit sooner to the Picture House because I'd gone and done a run up to the balcony and do a bomb into the swimming baths. And you had to do a bomb. If you jumped, you'd break your legs because it wasn't that deep. But the guy, the attendant, used to go every quarter of an hour, 10 minutes, to check in the gents' changing rooms, and when he disappeared this particular time, I ran up the steps onto the balcony and jumped off and did a bomb. But halfway in the air, I realised he'd come round the corner and saw me. So he pointed to me, whistled, pointed, and get out. I was bad. Yeah, it was lovely. But the same as the swimming bath. In winter, they put boards down, and that was usually the dance hall in the winter months when the swimming bath was shut.
I was born in Sowerby Bridge, just over the canal there, and been a long time drinker in the venue we're at now, at the Puzzle. Started here when I was about 15 actually. I snuck in and stayed for a couple of halves and then gradually came and been here ever since. I have a longer association, I've just remembered, with the pub because in the mid-30s when they were still brewing beer, my gran used to come down for yeast for bread making, things like that, so it must have just drawn me in somehow. For 3 years I ran a one-off cabaret in the Puzzle, mid-late November on a Monday night, absolutely packed. The first year we had some singers. I got down a local knife and axe thrower, who at the time, believe it or not, was the world champion. He lived up Norland and still does there. It was wonderful, really.
The Hollins Mill area has not been very well utilised in my lifetime. I think it's always been sort of a little bit out of the way. There's the Puzzle further on, which got closed a few years ago and has reopened as a community pub now, which I have vivid memories of going in there and sort of being in this cramped tiny little pub which had some of the best music in the valley. People coming from all over to play in this this really minuscule pub that, you know, it'd be packed if there was 10 people in there, never mind the 50 that they managed to get in. There's something special about the puzzle.
It's just nice to have sort of all these historic buildings that are still there and still in use and being repurposed. And sort of the Canoe Club is based in one of those that sort of dates from 1783, I think, in Greenups Mill. So it's good that we're making use of that. It's good that it's residential. And on the back of that, that's why the Canoe Club is here, making use of the old weir from the old mill, making use of the buildings and then redesigning the river to make it suitable to our purposes.
My favourite thing about Sorby Bridge is probably where it is, the fact that it's in the Pennines, so we've got beautiful walks and countryside all around, but it doesn't take very long to get into a city if you want to go somewhere as well.
I think the railway station is just crucial to Sorby Bridge, and I just think it needs to be looked after at least, not neglected, to make sure we keep it and not lose it.
That's one good thing about the railway station. They've got some plaques up celebrating famous people from Sorby Bridge, and I think Roger Hargreaves is one of them. But it wants to be on a more punchy sort of scale so that we take advantage of people who've gone before and promote, you know, the history and the heritage of the area.
I think what I enjoy most about Sorby Bridge is the community aspect of it and how so many people try to put on so many events and projects just to better the community, really.
For me, there's some fantastic creative people around, particularly the people who have worked on the Winterlight project. I mean, we've been doing that now for, I think, 9 years. And we've used the old fire station in Sorby Bridge as an art workshop. It's also spawned lots of creative workshops with schools. I've been into schools and the local college to work with students to make lanterns and to make sculpture, and it's really energised young people and old people alike, and it's brought the community together to a certain degree.
There's quite a good community here and quite a lot of different organisations in the town, and when there is a community event it's usually well patronised.
I'm chairman of Sorby Bridge Rushbone Association, which is a big annual event in the town in September. The event itself is all about working its way through the town. We start at the moorings, we work our way through. I guess we stop at the marketplace, so that's up in the central focal point of the town, which is why we really want to locally do something about that space and build it into something for the community. And ultimately we end up at this end of town. That brings the town together, it brings people from outside the area into the town, showcases it, and once people kind of come they realise there's a lot on the doorstep, and I think that brings people back in, and hopefully with the improvements that are coming we can then bring more people into the area and improve the economy locally, create jobs, and ultimately everyone has a better way of life and way of living here.
I think it's a really important thing to build community by having events. People need to come together in some way, and so I've been involved in putting on events specifically to draw together a sort of nascent community spirit. The Causey Beach project was a project where we wanted to use the space that hopefully will turn into a town square down in the old Causey. So what we did, we imported tons and tons of sand and created a beach, but we also had Punch and Judy stands, we had knobbly knee competitions, we had water fights, we had deck chairs. It was a fantastic fun day out for all the family. And what it showed was how the community really does relish the opportunity to be in these spaces together.
I love a lot of the events in Sorby Bridge, but I'm personally more involved in Oxjam, which is it's Oxfam's gig maker, if you like. We're the second largest in the country, but it's basically the whole town comes alive with music, and all the pubs host quite a few bands on throughout the day, and sort of it almost feels like a real festival going on throughout the whole town.
Well, Fire and Water came about in order to try and bring all of these redundant buildings behind me back into public use. After Fire and Water had been working on the project for a couple of years perhaps, there was nothing visible that could be seen by the local populace. And at that point, we weren't even allowed to go into the building. It was still at that stage of development. We weren't even allowed to touch the building, actually. So what we decided to do was to create an event in front of the building, around the building, and project it onto the building. And that is why Winterlight Festival came into being. It was a means of illustrating and demonstrating to everybody the type of activity that could come out of these redundant buildings behind me.
I think some of the strongest things happen when the community gets behind it. And I mean, at the height of it, we had 3,000 people turn up on a freezing cold December night to eat street food, listen to music and watch some light shows.
I think the events in Sowerby Bridge like Oxjam and Winterlight provide a real sense of community, and I think it really brings in a lot of money into the town and gives it that needed boost to become less of a travelled through town and more of a town that you want to come to.
The local festivals have become part of the weft of the town, I would say, and they are landmarks in the year that people look forward to and enjoy.
I'd like to see the shops revamped. I think all the buildings look dreary. The shop fronts look dreary, they're not appealing. There needs to be more community, places where people can visit and not people always charge. There has to be a real feel of belonging, and I think that's what's lacking at the moment. The buildings are looking tired, and I think this is a great opportunity to kind of waken them up and bring life back to Sowerby Bridge.
It's a shame about the banks. The Lloyd's one, which is the ex-town hall, that really needs to be something interesting because it's prominent as you come across the bridge. That's right in your face, and it's got the clock tower, so that needs to become, you know, something sympathetic and interesting, I think.
Just walking around the town, you see a lot of very old buildings, and this building, I think it's about 1864. And of course I remember when the other half was still standing, which was like a concert hall, and that was demolished about 1963. But it was a symmetrical frontage either side of the tower.
We fell in love with the building as soon as we saw it. The architecture of the building was just so magnificent. The spiral staircase is the bit that I fell in love with. At that time we hadn't seen the clock tower, but the spiral staircase just reminded me of the olden days of how things were built. They were built properly, they were built to last. The magnificence of the shape and how it kind of oversaw the whole prestige of the building itself. So we want to try and unveil the beauty that this building had in the past. So bring the architecture back, bring the coving back, bring the doors, the windows, and especially get that clock working. As and when we kind of move forward on this venture, we will have 2 bars and 2 restaurants. But the top floor, we want to open up the clock tower so the public can come to the clock tower from all over the country and see the wonderful sight that the clock tower has to offer. So young people, old people, we want it to become an iconic place for the country, iconic place for Halifax and for Calderdale.
The town hall clock tower chimed on the hour, and it kept good time. And I think it would be great for the town to have that going again. You know, just to hear that bell chiming the hour, that would be really great.
I think one of the most important things that could be done to improve the town is the area alongside B&M, the Regent Parade, to improve the look of that. There's potentially a really good space there, and it's a bit shabby at the moment, basically. Brings us down.
The Art Deco frontage that was a cinema, I think it was the Isoldo cinema, and that's just been ruined basically. It's such a shame. And I can't understand why the council, why can't they just sort of help people make the town visually more interesting and, you know, a nice place to be. That's all people really want, you know, and it will attract more people.
I'd like there to be more of a centre, I really would. It's just very linear, is Sorby Bridge, so it's dominated by the traffic passing through, and that sort of keeps the pedestrian numbers down, and there's nowhere really to sit, hang out, stop.
It needs art gallery, would be great, wouldn't it? You know, a riverside cafe, because there's no access to the river. It needs a design job doing on it, where you can have a riverside cafe or a canal side cafe, because it's a very beautiful part of the country. It's a fabulous setting, and it just needs a little bit of thought, bit of money, and I think it could be outstanding.
I'm hoping that the fire and water project can get going because of the community aspect to that. There's a lack of a really good quality area that people can meet and put on performances and do art and stuff like that.
I think there's a great scope for using the existing buildings that we have and preserving our heritage and our history, and bringing it forward into the 21st century to become functional buildings that can support what we need in this town, which is places to congregate, places to meet, places to get involved in stuff, places where people can engage with one another.
I think the public space would be better used, you know, when it's connected. So I think in Halifax, where they've moved the library near the Peace Hall and Square Chapel, I think that's a good idea. And I think, you know, we should try and do something similar. We've got the library and we've got fire and water, so it should be fairly straightforward to put some other cultural things and things people can actually use down by the library.
This is the original civic centre of the town. When the town was a self-governing town, this was where everything was on offer. You know, births, marriages, deaths, slaughterhouse, all sorts of things were taking place in this area. But I'm also very much involved in bringing buildings to life, and so I look at buildings from a point of view of how could they be reused in new ways that actually guarantee the future. The idea, the whole aim of Fire and Water is to create a facility for the town, to provide the dozens and dozens of opportunities that the town has lost over the years. No public venue, no adult education, no meeting places, almost no access to the river. What the place offers is space for no end of different activities. It's nicely at the opposite end of the town to the tourist stand where the moorings are on the canal, which of course has been developed. And our one thought was that if we've got two dynamic spaces in the town, then the area that joins them can only benefit from it, and the town can only see some growth as a result of that. So the fire station is just a black box, but it's wonderful that it opens out onto the street, and so we can put a band in there and they can play out to the street. There's basement buildings, basement spaces down here capable of being rehearsal studios, and where we're standing in our lovely swimming baths building, this will be eventually a 250-seater venue, which will be able to put on musical performances, but it could be fashion shows, it could be conferences, whatever. And it will give access through this wall with the windows in it out into the river, so we'll have a breakout platform out there, actually cantilevered over the river. We've got a garden hidden behind the end of this building, which will access the river and will create a new little oasis where people can come and, whether it's just having their lunch break from work or whether it's parties or whatever.
People are unaware of the potential, and I think we really need to thoroughly prepare these buildings for use, because in doing so they will reintroduce theatre space, they will reintroduce cinema space, they will reintroduce performance space, rehearsal spaces, community spaces. I think once that has been achieved, That will illustrate the benefit of generally developing buildings for community use.
The High Street Action Zone came out of the blue about 18 months ago, and Historic England required a council to have a community partner, and we are the community partner. And as a result of that partnership, we won £1.9 million for the town, spread out across a number of areas to try and improve public realm, to put new life into empty buildings, to restore or repair some of the listed buildings in the town, and the creation of new spaces. So the two major new spaces is the Market Square, which will become a public space, public venue space, and the street outside Fire and Water, where in the future it will be a pedestrian dominant street, and we foresee that there'll be events taking place very regularly. Could be like once a week there could be an event in the street. So we're at a difficult time because nothing much is happening inside, but we're also at a very, very exciting time because we're about to start on major repair works in some of the buildings, and they will then come into use. We've got people queuing up waiting to use those buildings already.
A lot of people, perhaps they just sort of, we feel that we're stuck with it and that things are not going to get better. You know, and that you just have to sort of get on with it as it is. And so I think the bar, especially for children and young people, wants raising so that they can see what the possibilities are. You know, there needs to be a better sort of feeling for what could be. There needs to be a big plan, doesn't there, really? There needs to be a big plan for the future of what's going to happen.
I think what's important is to realise that Sowerby Bridge was once this hub of industrial ambition. You can see it in all the building. It's carved in the grand entrances, and there was once ambition here and there was once money here, and I think by preserving that heritage, you're promoting that ambition, and we can be this happening place again.
We've got a development programme for this whole project, and it's in 10 stages, and those stages might take 20 years to do. Yeah. But we've got instant things, or almost instant things, that will have an immediate impact on the community. And all I think we can do is seize the day that we are able to do certain things. We're not going to get depressed about the state that we're in. We're going to simply say, there's a target, we can tackle that, this is how we'll do it, and we'll get on with it.
I think Sowerby Bridge is the entrance to Halifax and Calderdale. And I think the bridge is the entrance to Calderdale, enter Yorkshire. I'm very proud Yorkshireman. I was born and bred in Yorkshire. And so Sowerby Bridge is just a magnificent place. And I think people just let it run down. And it needs a massive regeneration to get that economy going again, to get that vibrancy going again, to get people to believe in what Sowerby Bridge offered years and years ago. This is a place where people just pass, and I think we need to stop that. We need to say, this is Sowerby Bridge, and we are proud.